welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I want to talk about intuition and fear today. This is actually a really highly requested topic, or maybe we'll just say like this is a question that I get pretty often as I have been sharing my journey either publicly online or with close friends. So a question that I get asked is, how do I tell the difference between my intuition versus my fear? Like a more specific question is like, okay, I want to go do this thing and then I'm scared to do that thing. And I can't tell, is it my intuition telling me to do the thing or is it my intuition telling me not to do the thing? Which is a valid question. So I want to give you kind of the easy answer up front, and then I want to dive into the complexities of this topic because I think that there is a lot to discuss on the matter. And I happen to have a decent amount of experience navigating my own intuition and my fear, so I'm just gonna speak to a little bit of what I've experienced as well. So, to start with, the easy answer up front, your intuition will never communicate with you through fear. I learned this actually quite some time ago. I want to say the first time I heard this was when I was listening to Oprah's podcast or maybe even her show back in the day. I don't remember, but something to do with an Oprah interview at one point in time. And one of the things that she had said is your intuition will not have an emotion attached to it, which I have found to be true. I've also heard others say that your intuition will be either a neutral voice or a loving voice. I've also found that to be true. So I think that where this can get complicated is sometimes you will get an intuitive nudge and then the emotion will immediately follow. And then you're kind of trying to differentiate or navigate that. So I think it's this practice of the more and more you tune into your intuition and you're asking yourself a lot of these questions and you're kind of diving deeper, then it can be easier to start to separate them out. But those are just some things to keep in mind up front as we navigate this conversation, which is your intuition does not typically have an emotion attached to it, like immediately attached to it, although emotion can follow, and your intuition will not communicate with you through fear. Okay, now that we've got that covered, I want to talk more about the complexities of this topic, and I also want to just share how I navigate my intuition and my fear, because this is something that I continuously am up against when I am walking the path of my intuition. I've said this a few times before, but when you are following the path of your intuition, when you are letting your intuition lead, it is likely in alignment with your highest timeline or your fullest potential. And in that scenario, you are going to consistently be bumping up against your comfort zone, your fears, your limiting beliefs, because your fullest potential is sitting on the opposite side of all of that. So I would say, although following the path of my intuition and living in alignment has brought with it a lot of ease, it has also brought with it a lot of discomfort. And I am usually experiencing fear and discomfort more often than I was previously before I decided to step into this. And it is just for the reason that I just explained, which is I am pushing past my comfort zone consistently and I am overcoming the fears and healing the limiting beliefs. So I have to face all of that head on. So that is kind of my experience with this topic. One of the other things that I want to say up front is I don't believe there to be a single right answer on how to navigate your intuition and your fear. I have heard a few different people discuss this topic, and I think that the reason there is no right answer is because everyone's intuition is different, shows up different, everyone's fears are different, everyone's life experience is different, right? So because all of that, you're not going to find a single right answer or way to approach this. You kind of have to learn how to navigate this in practice on your own. But I thought I would contribute to the conversation by sharing my experience, and then, maybe a piece of it will resonate or be helpful as you are thinking through this for yourself. So just keep that in mind as well. There is no right answer, but I think it is helpful to hear how a lot of other people sort of navigate this topic and then pull from that whatever is helpful for you. Okay, so the complexities of this conversation. I think that there are two different ways that your intuition and your fear are going to come up. One way is when they are in alignment. Your intuition and your fear are in alignment. And the other is when they are contradicting. So when your intuition and your fear are in alignment, what that kind of looks like. For me, that has really shown up in situations where maybe I was unsafe, like in an unsafe environment. Like I have one situation coming to mind where I had an intuitive gut knowing that something was just off, even though I didn't have necessarily proof or logical reason to believe that it was off. It just, there was something inside, just this gut feeling that said, this is unsafe, get out. And quickly following that was my fear of like, you are unsafe, get out. And that was a much easier situation to navigate because when your intuition and your fear are in alignment, the message is clear, get out. So I did. I just, removed myself from that situation and that was that, right? So I think that when your intuition and your fear are in alignment, they're both communicating the same message. It's a lot easier to take action on. What I want to focus this episode on, where I want to concentrate this episode, is when your intuition and your fear are communicating two different things. And I think this happens often for the reason that I explained. Your intuition is going to lead you in the direction of your fullest potential, and often that involves risk. And your fear is stemming from your logical mind, which is, I don't want to say created, but like determined. It is, the purpose is to keep you safe. So I think both are valid, right? Like your intuition is valid, and obviously I'm on this journey letting my intuition lead. So I find that very important, and that is a huge goal of mine. But I don't want to completely dismiss the fear as well, right? Your ego, your logical mind, it's meant to keep you safe. And I think sometimes you can end up over-indexing on the fear, and that will keep you small. So it is navigating this balance of attempting to move forward, following your intuition, while not just completely dismissing the fear, unless you're someone who can do that, in which case that's amazing. But it's a dance, right? So I want to speak to what has worked for me. The very first thing that I do when I am feeling an intuitive nudge to do something, and then I'm feeling the fears start to surface, the first thing that I do is I will take a deep dive on the fear. I will examine the fear. Instead of avoiding it, instead of dismissing it, I will figure out what the fear is trying to tell me. What is it attempting to communicate with me? So I think that there's a lot of questions that you can ask yourself here. And what I'm usually attempting to get to the root of is this real danger, or is this my subconscious programming coming to the surface? So I think that there are a lot of different questions that you can ask yourself when attempting to get to the root of the fear, or just like take a deep dive in general of the fear. I mean, first off, just understanding, like, what am I scared of? Is there maybe an emotion that I am trying to avoid through this? You can try asking yourself, is this rooted in abundance or scarcity? One of the places where this gets to be a little bit more complex, what I have noticed, is if your intuition is coming from your body. Like, for example, if there have been times where I heard someone ask me a question or make a suggestion, and I could feel my body contract. And then you have to ask yourself, okay, is this fear, or was that contracting because that was a no in my body? That was my intuition telling me no. And again, you got to dig a little deeper. You got to ask some more questions. So I think that specific piece can get a little bit more complex. That's what I've noticed for myself. But yeah, I would say it's just the first step is to just really being willing to dive in and ask yourself a lot of the deeper questions and just keep going, like why, why? Sometimes getting to the root can be helpful. Sometimes you don't have to do that, but just like understanding the intention behind the action is just the awareness to begin with is the first step of navigating this process, I would say. Okay, so after I've done a deep dive on the fear, let the fear communicate with me what it needed to say, then I will usually remind myself that if it's coming from your intuition and you're also experiencing fear in real time, I think that I won't give a blanket statement because sometimes your intuition is more urgent. But what I found for myself is that I don't always need to make a real-time decision or take real-time action on this intuitive nudge. And sometimes I will work to diminish the fear first. I will say, you go farther faster if you can get to a place where you can feel the fear, do it anyways, and just learn to sit with the discomfort of taking that action. That is going to be the fastest approach, but that isn't always the approach that I have taken. What I have done is take steps sometimes to diminish the fear first, and I will do that one of two different ways. One, I will work to heal the fear before I take the action, or I will work to minimize the risk before I take the action. So let me give you some examples here. When I was working to overcome the fear of being seen in order to post my story on the internet, I started by doing a lot of shadow work before I ever launched this podcast and before I ever posted videos on TikTok. Actually, that's a lie. I did post like 3 videos on TikTok a year ago, and it was so overwhelming for my nervous system. I deleted them all, and I was like, I need to go work to heal this fear first. And that's what I did. I ended up finding this mentorship program that was perfect for me, and it was about intuition and energy healing and overcoming the fear of being seen. So I was working through that, doing a lot of shadow work on overcoming the fear of being seen in a container with other women who were working on the exact same thing. So that was really healing, and that was probably a 3 or 4 month program that I did. And on the very last day of that program was the day that I launched my podcast. So all of that healing work allowed me to get to a space where I could come online and share my story, speak my truth in a way that didn't completely dysregulate my nervous system. And now I'm several months into this and I feel a lot more calm, and I'm able to, I won't say do this with comfort and with ease, because it does still feel uncomfortable sometimes, but I'm in a much better place. So it's been this slow progression versus like throwing myself right into the weeds of it while I was still feeling so much fear around it. So 1, you can work to heal the fear before taking the action. 2, you can work to minimize the risk before taking the action. So I think sometimes we experience a lot of fear because the risk of taking that action, that intuitive nudge, can be really high. So a good example of this was me quitting my job, right? Like I felt the intuitive nudge to do this, but there was a lot of potential risk involved if this didn't go well. So I've said before that I was contributing half financially to my household, right? I have a husband and a son that depend on me. We have a mortgage. There are a lot of financial implications that were involved in me leaving my job. So I still followed the intuitive nudge. I did it, but first I took steps to minimize the risk, which was taking a look at my financial situation, and it was looking at my savings, and it was selling stock to make sure that I had a proper runway to give myself some time to do this, to follow this path. Do I think that was necessary? I mean, For me, yes. I think there's always a piece of me that wants to say, like, it would have worked out either way. And I think that's true that, when you fully trust and you fully surrender, the universe will take care of you. I mean, I'm kind of like navigating a little bit of that right now as I get closer to my runway ending, as I get closer to the end of my runway. But then again, I do think that it was kind of necessary for me because, your ability to manifest is going to depend on what you are a vibrational what you are a vibrational match for. And if I had quit my job without working to minimize the risk and making sure that I was going to be safe financially for quite some time, that my family was going to be okay, I think that would have put me into an immediate state of scarcity if I had not done that first. And that is not true for everyone, because some people's level of trust and surrender may be stronger than mine was a year ago. So it doesn't have to be that way. But for me specifically, and for the mindset that I was in, or for the level of healing that I had done at that time, I do think that it was important for me to minimize the risk first before taking the leap of faith. So those are two examples, and it's kind of some insight into how I navigate my intuition and my fear, and kind of how I think about balancing the two. Something else that I want to say on the topic of intuition and fear is that learning to differentiate between your intuition and your fear is a process, and it's a practice. And sometimes you will get this wrong. And that's just part of the journey of learning to differentiate, because it's not always going to be super clear, especially if the decision is really, really close to you or really, really important. It can be a little bit more cloudy. That's why a lot of intuitives say sometimes it's harder to read for themselves than it is for others, because your emotion sometimes can be so strong that it doesn't give you the ability to see a clear picture. So, two things that I recommend in this scenario. One, I have leveraged the help of mentors or other intuitives to help me navigate that. So I've talked about how when I had the intuitive nudge to quit my job, one of the first things I did was go to my Reiki master and I asked, is this actually my intuition? Because it was such a big decision, right? And I felt like I needed some help. I felt like I needed a second opinion, and not an opinion of, whether or not I should do this from a logic standpoint. I didn't want someone else's input in that sort of way, but I needed help understanding, is this my intuition? Because I was going to trust myself and my intuition fully, but I couldn't quite clear up, is this my intuition, right? So having some help in that area has benefited me, and it's something that I do recommend. The other thing that I would recommend is, even if you can't quite differentiate your intuition from your fear, I would still take some time, and this is why the deep dive is helpful regardless. I would always recommend to set intention behind the action, or to know from what place you are acting from. So even if you're not quite sure, is this my intuition? Is this not? Is it not? Which is something I've battled, many times before. Always knowing, or always taking the time to understand from what place you are acting from. And I think that having intention behind your action can help in situations where, maybe things play out and you realize maybe that wasn't quite your intuition that you were acting from. So an example that I can give you is when I already intended and planned to quit my job. I had stock that I could sell to help fund this journey, and I was trying to figure out the best time to sell my stock. And this is always a little bit of a gamble, right? I mean, it is always a gamble, right? Because stock, okay, you get it. I'm not even going to go into finances and how the stock market works. You never know. No one can fully quite predict how things are going to go, right? So I wanted to sell the stock to fund my journey, and I was trying to lean into letting my intuition guide me of when the right time to sell was. But the fear of not selling and it dropping was loud, right? Because that was more of a risk, because that would limit my runway. And that kind of outweighed the benefit of, potentially holding it for longer and it going up. So I had to sit down and think, okay, I can't, this is like, my fear is really loud. I'm having trouble tuning into my intuition of when the right timing to do this is. So I sat down and I was really clear about my intentions. So I said, if I do not sell this stock, I hold it and the stock continues to rise, what does that mean for me? And for me, it meant that a company that I no longer believed in their mission was prospering. And that was in a misalignment with my own values, even if that meant more money for me. And if I sold the stock, then I was taking the time or taking the opportunity to invest in myself. So when I sat down and I made that decision, it was like, I know from what place I am selling this stock from. I have intention. I have thought deeply about what this means to me. So I sold the stock. And after I did that, over the last year, that stock has just, it has soared. So, was it my intuition telling me to sell the stock or not? I mean, I don't know. If we're basing it just purely on money itself, then yeah, it would have been beneficial or would have given me a longer runway to have held on to it for longer. But the reason why I'm able to look back and have no regrets is because I was so intentional behind that decision-making process. So, take steps to start to understand or start to practice learning the difference between your intuition and your fear, but also just know that you're not always going to get this right, and it's a practice, and all you can do is put your best foot forward and continue to attempt to take steps in the direction of your fullest potential by acting in accordance or by being really intentional behind the choices that you make, and hopefully making those choices in alignment with your intuition and in alignment with the person that you want to be, the person that you want to embody, the version of yourself that you want to embody. The last thing that I want to say on the matter is, so I've been getting this message a lot over the last week. I talked about this on TikTok, but this message of the ripple out effect. So I have actually attempted to film this specific podcast episode 2 times prior, and this is my 3rd time sitting down to film it. And I think that maybe the thing that was missing from the other 2 was the why. Like, what is the point of learning how to differentiate between your intuition and your fear? And what is the point of moving with your intuition instead of your fear, right? Like, what's wrong with your fear keeping you safe? There's nothing wrong with that. And if that is the path that you choose, then absolutely, like, that's totally fine. You can do that. But if I can convince you to move with your intuition, the thing that I would say, and the message that I've been getting over the past week, is the ripple out effect of you stepping into that, the ripple out effect of you making the decision to move from a place of love rather than from a place of fear. So the way that I've been getting this message is, there's this path that I walk by my house pretty regularly, and someone had written in chalk on the floor, and this is the 2nd time I'm sharing this story, and I have yet to go back and read the specific message, so I am going to summarize here rather than knowing the exact quote, but it was something along the lines of, you may think you're a single drop in the ocean, but every drop makes a ripple. And as I read that, there's like an acorn tree on the trail as well, and there's a body of water and an acorn. I think it's just the time of year because I have acorns falling on my car and just like all around, all over the place. But an acorn fell from the tree, dropped into the water, and it made a ripple. And since then, in the same week, I have heard several people, one being a friend who was over, discuss the ripple out effect. So it's just been this repeating message over the last week about the ripple out effect. The ripple out effect being that you cannot know, it's actually impossible to know the ripple out effect that you are having on others. So when my friend was over this weekend and talking to me about the ripple out effect, what she was saying was that by me choosing to follow my intuition and her witnessing that journey is giving her the courage to follow her dreams. And she is going to change lives. I feel so certain with every fiber of my being that she is going to change lives. So the impact of me speaking my truth, of me following the path of my intuition, of choosing to move with love, of choosing to overcome the fears, it's going to impact people that I am completely unaware of because of the ripple out effect. So I offer that to you of when you are deciding whether to move with your intuition, whether to move in alignment with your fullest potential, or to choose the fear, I ask you to consider, what is the ripple out effect of your decisions? How does that impact the people around you? How does that impact, your family, your partner, your kids? You never know who you're here to help. And I just think that by choosing to move in love, by choosing to follow your intuition, or however you want to go about it, but by choosing to make decisions in alignment with the best version of yourself, like, you have no idea the amount of people that you can help by doing that. And it's actually immeasurable. So there's no way of knowing. But I'd be willing to bet it's pretty large. So that is all I have for you today. I hope that this was helpful, and I will see you all again next time. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen.